That's right.
Yeah.
And Bob, Rob, if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is, we all came about an understanding that things go bump in the night, not because we were born with tinfoil hats or conspiratorial in nature. It's because we kind of paid attention even when things didn't make sense, because that's just the way we were. We asked questions. And that's what probably brought you to where you are, and myself as well. But one of the things that I'll give you an example for, back in 1976, now I worked for a guy that was 10 years older than I in a college athletic department, so we were all pretty randy guys, and he used to get Penthouse to read the articles. However,
as I did.
Well, you'll understand this though too. Somebody came out with an article, the author's name I've forgotten, but I had the article. But the thing is, he couldn't get it printed anywhere. They weren't going to take it in Newsweek in time, so guess where he got it out?
Yep.
Excuse that phrase, but he got it into Penthouse. And what I want to do is, I want to send you that because I have it on my late, how should I call it? It's an inactive site, but I can go and get stuff. And the name of it is The Unholy Alliance. I read this in May 76, and these are one of the things that made me stop and go, I never knew about this stuff. And it talks about how GM, DuPont, and Ford helped contribute to a great extent to the soon-to-become Nazi war machine.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, I don't mean to butt in too much, but especially, and not to downplay the other ones, but I do know that, in the case of Ford and Henry Ford, you could argue that if Henry Ford didn't invest in the Nazis, the party would have died during the 20s.
Yeah, that's it, Ford. You got it. And, well, anyway, don't feel like you're butting in. My God, you're our guest. I should shut up. So what I'll do is I'll throw it back to Adam, but I'm glad you mentioned that, and I would really like to send you that PDF because it just makes for interesting reading at a time a long time, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, and you bring up a very interesting point is the joke of I read only Penthouse only for the articles, or I read only Playboy for the articles, the two most famous. I mean, in particular, Penthouse had some really, really gutsy, out there journalism when nobody else was doing it. And to a lesser extent, Playboy's always been more of an establishment magazine,
right,
but they do kind of put their dip their fingers into more subversive stuff. And then there's, of course, Hustler, which, doesn't have as many articles as Penthouse, but, definitely Larry Flint is, pretty fearless in radical journalism and radical politics.
Yep.
And it's very interesting. And ironically, you still there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I got cut off. There was actually a really good article in Maxim magazine earlier this year about the electronic voting in Ohio, and basically made the very compelling argument that the election of 2004 for Bush was basically hacked in Ohio, and that's why Bush won.
Yep.
And it's amazing that it would be in, of all places, Maxim magazine, which we really think more of this frat boy metrosexual kind of empty but entertaining magazine. But they had some pretty hard journalism there.
Pretty hard journalism, is that a pun?
There you go. We can't get away from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of hard,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, speaking of hard journalism, let's get back to James Randi, right?
Yeah. I was going to say before we get back to Randi, there's another reason why Larry Flint is so fearless, because he's batshit crazy.
Yeah, well, I was actually watching on, I think it was CNN today, Elliot Spitzer was on. He's kind of gotten out of recluse hiding, and he was talking to, I think in some ways when you're either batshit crazy or if you're totally discredited, Elliot Spitzer is somebody to pay attention to now, because he has no reason to lie, because it's not like he has any credibility to protect anymore.
Yeah.
He's never going to be respectable again. So, we'll see what happens with John Edwards. I mean, John Edwards was one guy who, you know, I'll be honest, I look at him like as, you know, I wouldn't marry the guy, but, you know, politically, for the most part, as far as any establishment politician is concerned, he's never lied to me, you know. He may have cheated on his wife, well, more than they have, he did, but I'm not married to him, you know. And be interesting to see what happens with John Edwards in the future, if he will actually start talking about how the divide between the rich and poor, which is really a theme of his political campaigns, and whatever cynicism he has in his own sexual activities. I think politically he was about as sincere as you can get.
Well, if it doesn't work out in politics, he has a pretty face for TV, that's for sure. Hey, we were, so as is the nature of this show, we bouncing around all over the place. Let's skip back to the James Randi tapes, and I would assume that most of our listening audience probably doesn't know about these. It's been a number of years since those tapes really people became aware of them. So tell us about the tapes and perhaps about the article, the never-published article you wrote entitled, what was it entitled?
The Amazingly Randy. Basically what happened was there was some tapes of Randi that got obtained. It was like his answering machine recordings, and apparently, you know, reading between the lines of what was on the tape, he had put his phone number up in a bathroom stall somewhere in his area, where basically asking teenage boys to have sex with him. And because numerous teenage boys were calling him up on this matter. And, you know, when the tapes first revealed, he was trying to say that he was being blackmailed by boys, that he started taping it because all these boys started calling him, which he didn't want. Even though on the tape he keeps saying, you know, I'm never going to meet for, you know, some sucking. And he kept mentioning how he had a 10.5 inch peanut. But, of course, James Randi's has a history of exaggerated claims, so keep that in mind here. But, yeah, it was a tape recording where he's basically trying to talk little boys into have sex with him. And so when I heard about that, I figured, wow, this is an interesting story. You know, especially because he had actually gone after certain opponents of his. There was this guy named Eldon Bird who was involved in some quasi, I wouldn't say new age, but parascientific studies. And, you know, this guy actually had, you know, good credentials as a scientist as compared to Randi. But Randi just was relentless on this guy and accused him of being the shopping mall molester, was the charge that he made, which was actually had no basis in reality. And Eldon Bird actually sued Randi and won in court in it, although he didn't get any damages, which is a whole other story in itself. So anyways, I figured, well, here's one of these guys who's long used, you know, slammed people and slandered people and smeared people as enemies. Why don't I write a story on this? And so I mentioned it, and needless to say, there was a lot of reaction from a lot of people. I got a surprising amount of letters from different people in support of my article. It did spread pretty well at the time, and somehow soon after I got the tapes, and I pretty much know who gave it to me, even though that person didn't tell me that. But I'm able to do the math, and you know, I'll keep it silent. But there's an interesting story that I'm not going to reveal yet on that. Maybe one day in a couple of years, I will spin the beans on how I got the Randi tapes. But then I got the tapes, got to actually read the what do you call that? The transcripts of the tapes, and I wrote this article called "The Amazingly Randy." And I also picked as a picture for Randi, this really creepy looking picture that was supposed to be at the top of it, of the